யாழ் நகரில் இருந்து 22 கிலோமீட்டர் தொலைவில் இம்முருகன் ஆலயம் அமைந்துள்ளது. இங்கு பூஜை செய்பவர்கள் ஏனைய ஆலயங்களில் பூஜை செய்பவர்கள் போலல்லாமல் தமது வாயினை வெள்ளை துணியினால் கட்டியவாறு பூஜை செய்யும் கப்பூராளிகளாவர். வல்லிபுர ஆழ்வார் கோவில் 13ஆம் நூற்றாண்டில் கட்டப்பட்ட இக்கோவில் அமைக்கப்பட்ட காலம் தமிழ் பௌத்தர்களும் இந்துக்களும் ஒன்றாக வாழ்ந்த காலமாகும். இவ்வாலயத்தின் மூலஸ்தானத்தில் சங்கு சக்கரம் வைத்து வழிபாடு மேற்கொள்ளப்படுகின்றது. பருத்தித்துறை நகரில் இருந்து கிழக்காக 6 கிலோமீட்டர் தொலைவில் இக்கோவில் அமைந்துள்ளது. நைனை நாகபூஷணியம்மன் ஆலயம் வடமாகாணத்தின் நாகர் வழிபாட்டின் கோவிலாக காணப்படும் இக்கோவில் 64 சக்தி பீடங்களில் ஒன்றாகவும் கருதப்படுகின்றது. ராமாயணத்தில் ராவணன் சக்தி வழிபாடு செய்த தலமாகவும் இது கருதப்படுகின்றது. நாகதீப விஹாரை இயக்கர் நாகர் என்னும் இரு பிரிவுகளுக்கிடையே ஏற்பட்ட அரியணை பிணக்கை தீர்ப்பதற்கு நைனாதீவுக்கு வந்த புத்தர் அப்பிரச்சனையை சுமூகமாக தீர்க்க அவ்வரசர்கள் தமது அரியணையை புத்தருக்கு பரிசளித்தனர் என்ற வரலாறோடு தொடர்படும் இந்த நாகதீப விகாரைக்கு அதிகளவான பௌத்தர்கள் வருவது வழக்கமாகும். முறிகண்டி பிள்ளையார் கோவில் யாழ் கண்டி வீதியில் முறிகண்டி பிரதேசத்தில் அமைந்துள்ள கோவிலே இதுவாகும். பிரதான வீதியூடாக பயணம் செய்பவர்கள் தரித்து நின்று இளைப்பாறி செல்லும் இடமாகவும் இக்கோவில் காணப்படுகின்றது. பார்ப்பதற்கு சிறிய தோற்றத்துடன் காணப்படும் இக்கோவில் பிரித்தானியர் காலத்தில் கட்டப்பட்ட மிக நீண்ட வரலாற்றை கொண்ட ஆலயமாகும். புளியம்பொக்கணை நாகதம்பிரான் ஆலயம் மிக பழமை வாய்ந்த நாகர் வழிபாட்டு தலமான இங்கு பக்தர்கள் வெள்ளை நாகத்தை வழிபாடு செய்கின்றனர். அத்தோடு இங்கு வாழும் மக்கள் நாகத்துக்கு தீங்கு விளைவிக்க மாட்டார்கள் என்றும் நம்பப்படுகின்றது. வெற்றாப்பளை கண்ணகியம்மன் ஆலயம் முல்லைத்தீவு நகரில் இருந்து 3 கிலோமீட்டர் தொலைவில் அமைந்துள்ள இக்கோவில் தமிழ்நாட்டில் கண்ணகியம்மனுக்கு கோவில்கள் அமைந்த அதே கால பகுதியில் தோற்றம் பெற்றது. ஒட்டுசுட்டான் தான்தோன்றீஸ்வரம் முல்லைத்தீவு மாவட்டத்தில் ஒட்டுசுட்டான் பிரதேசத்திற்கு அண்மையில் அமைந்துள்ள மிக பிரபலமான சிவாலயம் இதுவாகும். இங்குள்ள சிவலிங்கம் தானாகவே தோன்றியதாகும். மடுமாதா தேவாலயம் கத்தோலிக்கர்களின் புனித தலமாக காணப்படும் இத்தலம் மூவின மக்களும் வழிபாடுகளில் ஈடுபடும் யாத்திரிக தலமாகவும் காணப்படுகின்றது. மன்னார் மாவட்டத்தில் எழில்மிகு காடுகளுக்கு நடுவில் அமைந்துள்ள 400 ஆண்டுகள் பழமை வாய்ந்த தேவாலயத்தில் ஜூலை மாதம் 2ஆம் தேதி தொடக்கம் ஆகஸ்ட் 15 வரை இங்கு திருவிழா சிறப்பாக நடைபெறும். திருக்கேதீஸ்வரம் மன்னார் மாவட்டத்தில் அமைந்துள்ள இவ்வாலயம் இலங்கையில் உள்ள பழமை வாய்ந்த 5 சிவாலயங்களில் ஒன்றாகவும் தேவார பாடல் பெற்ற தலமாகவும் காணப்படுகின்றது. 2000 ஆண்டுகளுக்கு முற்பட்ட கால வரலாற்றை கொண்டமைந்த இக்கோவில் 1570ஆம் ஆண்டு போர்த்துகேயரால் உடைக்கப்பட்டு ஒல்லாந்தர் காலத்தில் மீண்டும் கட்டப்பட்டது. மடுக்கந்த விகாரை மகிந்த தேரர் வெள்ளரசு மரக்கிளையை இங்கு வைத்து பூஜித்ததாகவும் 4ஆம் நூற்றாண்டில் புத்தரின் தந்தம் இவ்விகாரை அமைந்துள்ள இடத்தின் ஊடாக அனுராதபுரம் கொண்டு செல்லப்பட்டதாக வரலாறுகள் கூறுகின்றன. கல்வாரி தேவாலயம் வவுனியா மாவட்டம் வவுனியா நகரில் இருந்து 10 கிலோமீட்டர் தொலைவில் பெரிய கோமரசங்குளம் பகுதியில் உள்ள மலைக்குன்றில் இத்தேவாலயம் அமைந்துள்ளது. இயேசுபிரானின் பல்வேறுபட்ட திருப்பாடுகளை சித்தரிக்கும் சிற்பங்கள் இம்மலை உச்சியில் காணப்படுகின்றன. பழனிமலை முருகன் கோவில் வவுனியா மாவட்டம் சிதம்பரபுரம் கிராமத்தில் 200 மீட்டர் உயரமான மலை உச்சியில் அமைந்துள்ளதே இவ்வாலயமாகும். வடக்கில் காணப்பன இதற்கு செல்வதற்கு 400 படிக்கட்டுகளை கடந்து செல்ல வேண்டும். நெடுங்கேணி வெடுக்கு நாரிமலை, மலைக்குன்றுகள், மலைச்சாரல்கள், குகைகள் நிறைந்த இப்பிரதேசம் இலங்கையின் ஆதிக்குடிகள் வாழ்ந்த பிரதேசமாக அடையாளப்படுத்தப்பட்டுள்ளது. வவுனியா மாவட்டம் வவுனியா வடக்கு பிரதேசத்தில் இம்மலை அமைந்துள்ளது.
Hi everybody.
Hello.
Welcome to. I can see Neville, Ranil. Can we have Chandri and Chandri's video on? Okay. All right. So we're all good to go. Welcome the panel, and welcome all those who have joined us through Zoom, through Facebook, and YouTube. My name is Honorable Ferdinand. I'm pleased to volunteer today to moderate this webinar organized by the Ontario Policy Research, Ontario Centre for Policy Research. Today's webinar is going to focus on economic recovery from COVID-19, alleged Tamil genocide, Bill 104, and monuments. It's a lot to discuss today, and I'm happy and I'm great to see the wealth of knowledge around this panel. Speaking about Bill 104, I will give introduction about Bill 104, and then after that I will introduce the speakers. Bill 104 was introduced by MPP Vijay Thanigalasim in 2009, and it is looking for a week to educate the alleged Tamil genocide. Bill states, during this period, a week before May 18th, all Ontarians are encouraged to educate themselves about and maintain their awareness of the Tamil genocide and other genocides that have occurred in world history. This bill was tabled in 2019 for the first reading, had the second reading, and it was referred to private members committee. Exact name was Standing Committee on Regulations and Private Bills. And in in May 6, the third reading was carried, and it received the royal assent on the 12th of May. This bill sets a dangerous precedent for the conflicts that's happened around the world, and it also raises a lot of questions about the jurisdiction of the Ontario province to make such an extreme claim that there was genocide, while the federal government and even the United Nations, who is the supreme United Nations Human Rights Commission, who is the supreme body to announce of such an atrocity. However, Ontario government passed this bill in almost in a questionable manner that our presenters will talk about. All right. Today, we are joined by Dr. Neville Hevage, Dr. Chandra Dharmardana, and Mr. Ranil Jayanetti. I am going to talk about the questions first. The format of today's webinar is going to be discussion based. Some questions are going to be aimed at all the panel, and some questions at certain members of the panel. Viewers can post the question in the chat window or email info@policyresearch.ca, or raise the question or raise the hand. All right, starting with the first question, and this is sent to Ranil, Neville, and Chandre. First question: world is facing a health crisis. COVID pandemic has hit hard to all corners of the world. However, the pro-LTT Tamil diaspora campaigns for an alleged Tamil genocide. Is there any reason for this? Please share your opinions. First, I'm going to invite to Ranil. Mr. Jainati.
Thank you, Andrew, for
Unmute
the
you.
question.
Unmute your speaker.
It's all good.
Thank
Go
you,
ahead.
Neville. Now, you hear me, right?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, I think it would be more, first of all, we are going through a difficult time with regard to COVID, especially in Sri Lanka. The numbers are rising. At the same time, it's sad to notice the passing of this bill in Canada. Actually, genocide is defined as a killing of a large number of people belonging to one ethnic group with the aim of destroying that ethnic group. We have examples from different parts of the world where that has happened. For example, by the 1933 German government, how they handled the issues with the Jews. But this kind of thing never happened in Sri Lanka. Now, there are claims of 40,000 people being killed in the last stages of the war. 40,000 is pretty much a genocidal number. But this number, we know now that this number is wrong. It is a concocted number, fabricated to discredit the soldiers of the Sri Lankan security forces who took grave risks to save the Tamil civilians who were entrapped. So on one side, we have these 40,000 people being killed, but we know at the same time, the Sri Lankan security forces rescued 300,000 Tamil civilians who were being shot and by the Tamil Tigers, who were being taken as hostage by the Tamil Tigers. So anyone with a little bit of IQ would be able to figure out, now, if a state really had the interest to kill 40,000 members belonging to one ethnic group, why would they rescue 300,000 members of that ethnic group in that situation? So I think it would be appropriate at this moment to share a video with you. Just let me share this video. Now, this was released by the Sri Lanka Army, and this was there's also an interview of an army officer by a foreign journalist. So I would invite you to just look at the facial expressions of this army officer, seeing how he is happy that they were able to rescue these 300,000 civilians of Tamils.
The army gives us this footage recorded by one of its aerial observation drones. They say it shows LTT fighters shooting into the sand to stop civilians trying to make a break for freedom. In the end, it was Colonel Senarat Yaka's brigade which fought its way across the lagoon and captured a vital causeway. Now the refugees had an escape route.
Was the accomplishment of our mission. Prime aim was to rescue civilians, and when they were coming, actually we were happy and they were really happy about it.
So you saw how the Sri Lanka Army rescued those civilians, and the facial expression of this army officer, how they were happy to rescue those people. But nevertheless, there was this 40,000 number that has been put from somewhere. And I would say that this fabrication of the story started also around in just at the time of the end of the war, around in 2009. Why I say this is in Switzerland, where I live, the local newspaper, just after the end of the war, published an article making the question, is it another Srebrenica? Now, Srebrenica, we know, was a place which is known for the massacre of Bosnians in the Yugoslavian war. So it is clear that this was a concocted story from that time. So I think it is pretty sad that the Canadian politicians are supporting this narrative. Now, with this narrative, it appears that the younger generation of Tamils are forced to believe something that has not happened. And this will make a generation of paranoid youth, and this is pretty unfortunate. If you look at the situation in Sri Lanka with regard to COVID, there are a lot of people now who are trying to help the COVID situation in Sri Lanka. The hospitals lack certain facilities, example, oximeters, the pressure meters, oxygen cylinders, all that. People are contributing whatever they can to contain this situation. But the Tamil diaspora, they spend so much of money, have collected so much of money that they are not doing anything in this regard, but going in this direction of establishing a concocted story. So this is my side of the view on that.
Thank you, Mr. Janetti. Can I invite Dr. Neville Hevage? Now, Dr. Neville Hevage is the adjunct professor at the University of, is a research fellow at the International Center for Interdisciplinary Research in Law at the Laurentian University, Canada. Dr. Hevage, what's your thoughts about the question on world is facing health crisis? COVID pandemic has hit all corners of the world. However, the pro-LTT Tamil diaspora campaigns for an alleged Tamil genocide. Your thoughts, please.
Thank you very much, Aruna. But actually, we need to look at this matter in the broader way. So as example, so we know that in March 11, MPP Scarborough and the sponsor of the Bill 104 and organized the fundraiser. And the fundraiser, we estimated that around 200,000, and they have donated to the PC party, provincial premier, Doug Ford party, as a campaign expense, the party. And each and every individual paid roughly $1,000, and they also got the tax receipt. So now, what is the situation in Sri Lanka? Sri Lanka, in Jaffna, and all the people are suffering for this COVID pandemic. What Indians are doing, all the Indian communities get together and they collected the medical supply, all other equipment and necessary to help their fellow Indians. But in Canada, what happened? So it has happened, they completely ignored and forget about this, their fellow Tamils are living in Sri Lanka, and especially for the north and east part of the area. and there is no any economic support. There is no any medical equipment for them, but they have raised over 200,000 to donate for the political party. So what is the reason behind it? So we need to question as a general and Canadian public, what is the motive behind this? Are they having a real critical interest about the Tamils are living in Sri Lanka? Actually not. Then after that, what happened? They were influenced and highly campaigned the Tamil Genocide Education Bill, Bill 104. But there are questions about this legal issue. Now it is before the court. And so therefore, I'm not going to talk about that much. But basically, this information is clearly inform us. They have no any interest about the Tamil living in Sri Lanka. They have interest about their own propaganda campaign, own self-interest. So that is the word I can tell you about this.
Thank you, Dr. Hevage. It is quite unfortunate even to witness these kind of double standards where the country is suffering and then all they could do is carry a donation campaign for political campaign. Thank you for putting that out. Dr. Dharmawardana. Now, Dr. Dharmawardana is an adjunct professor at the University of Montreal. What's your thoughts about the question?
Let me first point out that the Tamil movements in Canada and all over the world, right from the beginning, they are not humanitarian organizations. They are not interested in COVID. They are not interested in the suffering of the people in the northern part of Sri Lanka. In fact, after the war, end of war in 2009, you would have expected these organizations to rush to the north and help the Tamil people who they regard as their people, distinguishing themselves from the Sinhalese. But nothing of the sort happened. Instead of sending money to help or setting up industries or doing anything like that, they said, oh, this part of the country is still ruled by Colombo. We don't want to support these northern territories until we have Elam. And so they took their hands off, and their political movement started by claiming that in fact, the northern part of Sri Lanka has not been liberated by the Sri Lankan government, but that in fact, the Sri Lankan government has carried out a genocide of the people. And of course, it was claimed to begin with that 40,000 people were killed. Then Mr. Vijay Thanikasalam raised the number to 170,000 people. Remember that the whole population in the northern part of this Sri Lanka is around 500,000, which decreased quite a lot due to immigration during the war. So where did these numbers come from? They came from nowhere. In fact, the British House of Lords, led by Lord Nesaby, carried out a detailed study and found that it is not 170,000, it is not 40,000, it is just 7,000 people who have died. And you know, for each person who dies in a war, there is what is called collateral. Other people who get hit by accidental crossfire. So for every person, normally you get about 3 people who are injured. So you would expect if 7,000 died, about 20,000 people to be injured. And that's exactly the numbers. I think the numbers around 18,000 that they found among the population. If 170,000 people had been killed, you would expect something like 600,000 people to be injured, an impossibility. And there would have to be 170,000 mass graves in the north. Nobody has found these mass graves, although a Tamil government was in the north and looked very hard, and they dug up one grave in Mana, saying this is one of the genocidal graves where thousands of people have been buried. And they found these skeletons, and the skeletons were The samples of these skeletons were sent to Florida for examination, DNA testing, and they found that these skeletons were in fact from the Portuguese era, when one of the Tamil leaders called Sankili killed all the Tamils who became Christians. So this is a Tamil genocide perpetrated by the Tamils. That's the only evidence that we have. And subsequently, I mean, all the genocide claims have been, if you talk to someone like the secretary of the Tamil United Liberation Front, Mr. Veerasingham Sangari, who is the father of Gary Sangari, he will tell you that if there was a genocide of Tamils, that genocide was carried out by Prabhakaran, the leader of the LTT. And it is this leader of the LTT who was removed by military action in 2009. And in 2010, Geneva, all the governments of the world thanked the Sri Lankan government, celebrated it, congratulated it. And similarly, there were firecrackers and celebration, not only in the Sinhalese parts of the country, but all over the country. And so this is why I'm saying that this is not, this is just a political movement. This is a political program carried out by the remnants of the LTTE, because they want to carry on bringing refugees into this country, because every refugee means $35,000 to $40,000 per person. When a refugee ship came to Canada not so long ago, the captain, Mr. Brem, he was interviewed and he had to admit that $45,000 was charged. And then some of the refugees were interviewed and they spoke excellent English. Do you think a refugee Tamil living in the Vandi can speak such good English? These were people who had moved out of Sri Lanka perhaps sometime earlier, even before the war. But they had the money. They were living in Malaysia, they were living in Thailand, they were living in India, and they paid the money and came here claiming refugee status. This is the bogus program that's going on. And I believe that the Bill 104, which claims that there has been a genocide, is merely a means of strengthening their claim so that refugees can be brought by various clandestine or other means. And then once they are declared refugee status, then they have to be heard according to the laws of Canada. And so this is merely a way of keeping their money supplied. And that is why the Bill 104 was so important. And that's why they were willing to ignore what's going on in Sri Lanka with respect to COVID and invest their money in the Progressive Conservative Party, which is in power in Ontario and who backed this bill, which became law provisionally. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Dharmanandan.
Anura, excuse me, before you go on to the next question, perhaps may I add something to the earlier
Sure,
question?
go ahead. Maybe a minute or two.
Yeah. Two things basically. One of why these genocide claims should be actually are denied, and actually people don't believe this. It is a surprise to me that this bill was passed in Ontario. And one of the staunchest support of the LTT fascist diaspora, Mr. Callum McRae, the director of Killing Fields film, which was then telecast over England's Channel 4 channel. He came to Switzerland in 2013 to stage his film. And in this film show, I had a confrontation with him. And in that confrontation, he stated directly to me that the Sri Lankan government did not commit genocide. And this is one of the staunchest supporters of the the LTT diaspora after the end of the war in 2009. And then if you look at the demographics of Sri Lanka, 60% of the Tamils live in the Sinhalese villages and in the Sinhalese area. It is not only after 2009, even during the 2009 or during the war leading to 2009, people were living in the south. So there was no intention by any party that is connected to the government or the Sinhalese majority to destroy or eliminate the Tamil population from Sri Lanka. So this is absolute untrue.
Thank you. Going on to the next question we have received. The alleged Tamil genocide campaign has primarily hit in Western countries such as Canada, US, UK, and some Scandinavian countries like Denmark, Switzerland, etc. However, we have not heard of such a campaign in Somalia, Ethiopia, or Bangladesh. Can you provide reasons for this distinction? Starting with Dr. Hevage. You're muted.
Thank you very much, Anwar. Actually, the part of so this question answered by previous panelists. So basically, they are going to campaign for the genocide campaign in the Western world, and the Switzerland, Canada, US, and other area. And there's a clear distinction. They are not going to campaign genocide campaign in the third world countries. So what is the reason behind? So we have to look into the broader aspects. So their main purpose is the influence asylum policy in these countries to create the money-making machine for the LTTE. So that is the only reason. So then we look at the Canadian context. Then we don't want to go too much far. So we know that 2010 and August 13, and there's a MV Sun landed in British Columbia. So this ship has 492 refugees. This group and every individual, as he explained, and paid 45,000 to over 45,000. So I have a clear transcript from number of refugee claimants. So they have established that fact. Where this money go? That is the question. So this is the question we are asking. This money is going to the LTT operative, pro-LTT operative in Canada, and they collect the money and they are making their self-serving propaganda to continue the campaign and saying that alleged genocide. No, now what happened was after 2009, war ended. Now all the Western governments, they have stopped and giving refugee status for the Tamil, especially come from Sri Lanka. So then as example, and the previous cases, previous years, the data shows us roughly 20,000 Tamils were granted as refugees each and every year during the last during the war period. But this last few years, only 619 application has been granted. So now we have a question. So now they have dropped this number of applications, and they lost the revenue, and it's easy money, and easy money and good money, and they want to continue with some other campaign. Now they cannot go. They know definitely Sri Lanka, in Sri Lanka, they will not get the ILAM. So they will not get the separate state. Now they have to have another motto, another campaign, that is the genocide campaign. So that's why they started, and they are campaigning for the Western world and to get the more support and for the influence the asylum policy. Definitely, I can tell you one more thing. Then soon after the bill passed, but according to the bill, and they are going to teach, or maybe Canadian has to be educated about the Tamil genocide. But eventually what will happen, they will say, oh, genocide is still continuing, and tomorrow we will have another boat people coming to Sri Lanka. Their primary interest is not about the Tamil. Not about the Tamil. They want to find out the Tamil who can spend the money and put them into the boat and bring it to the Canada and claim the 45,000 to 65,000. So we have clear evidence from United Kingdom, and they are running in Canada, and it's the asylum factories. So this is what is happening. That is the only reason, and a genocide is a mythical genocide. But actually, it is better to Canada to understand about the Tamil genocide, and the people will start learning. So what kind of bogus campaign, and law students and everybody in the public, and it is not be emotional, and they will identify, okay, then how come 60% of the people are living in south villages with the Sinhalese? How come? So you are claiming that attempt to the destroy Tamil community. So what are the examples? So what are the evidence you can provide? So then final my answer for this, and they want to influence asylum policy in the Western world to create their money-making machine.
Thank you, Dr. Hevage. Can I invite Dr. Damodana? Your response, please.
Yes, I think it's very interesting to note that these genocide claims and other claims are coming up from vocal groups in what you might call the developed Western countries. On the other hand, if you look at the Geneva Resolution, it was backed by two countries which do not build several countries which do not belong to these so-called Western countries. They are the African country Malawi. Then there was, for instance, Mauritius, which is well somewhat developed, but not in the same league. Now, why did these countries also come? And then you just have to look at how the political situation is, how the American government is involved in these countries. These countries are merely puppets of Western countries, and they came forward, and they have no real, real stake in this, but they came forward and supported the Western governments in their resolution. And the resolution is run or pushed forward by 4 Western governments, mainly Britain, France, and Britain, Canada, France, and also, of course, you must remember, even Australia is involved, even if indirectly. So you see that it is entirely a Western government. The governments like Japan and so on are also in effect supporting this. But China and Russia do not support this. These countries like China and Russia, they do not have any Tamil refugees. Tamils don't want to go to those countries. The Tamils want to go to the wealthy countries. And this is the whole secret of this issue. It is wealth. It's based on maximizing opportunities for refugees. Thank you very much.
Thank you. May I invite Mr. Janetti?
Yes, thank you, Andre. Actually, your question was that these genocide claims happening in the developed countries, why not in other countries? Even if you look at, if your house is burning, you, in the first place, you run to the next door house to get to secure yourself. So during the war, we didn't see that the Sri Lankan refugees or the Tamil refugees going to the closest countries like Maldives in Bhutan or Pakistan. Some went to India, that's right, but to those countries they didn't go. That is one side of the thing, and on the other hand, it is important to understand why is this genocide claim now coming up since a few years. Now, during the time of the war, as the other two panelists explained, refugee business in the West became a very lucrative business for the LTT diaspora. Now, to convince the refugee policy of these Western countries, at the beginning, they focused, or they made the narrative that in Sri Lanka, the Tamils are discriminated. Now, this, after some time, they understood that this is wrong, because in the Tamils or any other minority is not discriminated in Sri Lanka. you see, every Sri Lankan child has the right to free education from grade 1 up to university. And every Sri Lankan citizen gets his medicine, whether he's a Tamil or Muslim or Sinhalese. And a person in Jaffna can get his medicine in Colombo or in Kurunegala. So therefore, the belief that that in Sri Lanka the minorities were discriminated was not getting hold within the Western countries. So that is why they have now come up with bogus genocide claims. Thank you.
Thank you. Going on to the next question. Will the promotion of a mythical Tamil genocide in Western countries provide any justice to Tamils peacefully living in Sri Lanka, in all parts of Sri Lanka? I'd like to invite Dr. Dharmavardhana. What's your thoughts on this?
Well, I don't think that passing of this bill has anything to do with helping the Sri Lankan Tamil community, because it talks of teaching the Canadian students about genocide awareness, and in particular the awareness that there was a genocide of Tamils in Sri Lanka. So to whom is this bill directed? It is directed to educating the Canadian students in Ontario. This means there will be some money given to the people who are going to teach this. And who are the people who are going to teach this? This is going to be run by the same people who promoted the bill. So this is just a cash cow for the Tamil militants who are claiming that there was a genocide in Sri Lanka. And this money cannot go in any way to Sri Lanka. In fact, what I have heard is that they are raising money in Sri Lanka from what you might call the fringe, highly militant Tamil group, saying, look, you have to help this bill that we are setting up in Canada. Send us money. So it's not a case of, and what has happened in Sri Lanka, if you take the leading Tamil party, which is called the Tamil National Alliance, its spokesman, Mr. Sumantiran, has categorically rejected the claim that there has been a genocide. He said, this is nonsense. There has been no genocide. So the Tamil leaders have rejected it. And similarly, Mr. Anand Sangari has rejected it. There is one leader who has supported it, who has really, he has supported this bill because he wants to get the support of the diaspora for his very weak political standing in the country. So he's what you would call an extremist fringe politician, Mr. Vigneswaran. And Mr. Vigneswaran is, of course, a paradox, because he lived in Colombo and he was a judge in Sri Lanka, and he has children who are married to the Sinhalese, and he is very well integrated. And yet he became a politician in the north and even suggests that there should be no interracial marriages, that Tamil language and Tamil race should be maintained in some kind of pure state. So this is his thinking. And he is the only man who supports this kind of bill, or this kind of claim of genocide. So you see that even the Tamil people in Sri Lanka have rejected this, and they also have rejected the appeal for funds from them. They are not benefiting from it. They are pushed into a very difficult situation by this bill, because they have to coexist and live with the Sinhalese, with the majority of the people, with the Tamils, with the Muslims, because it is that, I mean, the Muslims were driven out of the north in 1990 by the LTT, saying that they want an exclusive Tamil Elam. The Sinhalese are also driven out. a little earlier than that. So they had thereby cleaned up the North, ethnic cleansing. And this is the situation that is there. And today that is not possible. Today we have communication, trade, and tourism. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can I have the opinion of Mr. Jayanti?
I think what Dr. Chandra said was pretty interesting, because all what he said points to that the LTT diaspora and the ideology of the LTT is one that is a fascist, because the fascists are the people who are against integration but promote segregation. So they are against interracial marriages and all that. And so to answer your question, if this genocide campaign in the West will benefit the people, the Tamil people in Sri Lanka, absolutely no. But on the other hand, as the intention of the genocide campaign is to influence the refugee policy in the West to benefit these Tamil LTT businessmen, this will, on the other hand, will deny refugee rights to people from the current hotspots in the world. For example, from people from Yemen and from Venezuela. Because, for example, I mean, a country has a certain number of refugee spots that they can take. So you take refugees from Sri Lanka where there is no reason to become a refugee. And when that spot is given to a person coming from Sri Lanka, and naturally that right is denied to a Yemenis or to a person from Venezuela. So this is, I think the Western governments and the Western politicians must understand this situation. Thank you.
Thank you. And Dr. Hebage, what's your thoughts on this?
So actually my previous panelists, they answered the question very well. So basically what happened, and they are making a business and they are denying and rights for other people and other refugees and eligible refugees who are supposed to be get the protection, and so they will not have a chance to come to Canada. And then there was a recent study carried out by the Angus Reid, and there was a question and they asked, so what do you think about this Tamil refugee asylum seekers? And the 48% Canadian say that we have to send them back to Sri Lanka. So that is the situation. So this situation is continuing, and they want to have a different narrative, and there is no war, and there is no any discrimination they can prove against the Tamil. Only now is the pattern, and they want to establish for the Tamil genocide. So, so what is the ulterior motive behind the act, Bill 104? And most of the organization act or any other thing, they have a one single day to celebrate, and they celebrate one or maybe commemorate one, and it's done. Now here we have 7 days of whole week, and the Canadians has to learn this bogus Tamil genocide. And so what is the purpose of that? They want to approach, and every year, and so this is clearly mentioned on the bill, and it is every year, so they want to continue. So this is the business. So it's meaning that they want to continue money-making machine, and they collect the money, and they will say, okay, this is a genocide. And then after that, they will put another Tamil in Malaysia or some other country and put into the board and come to Canada. And there are so many lawyers around and other business people hanging around to support for that application. So then after that, soon after they claim application, 35,000 to 65,000 they have to pay for the LTT operatives in Canada. So it is a well-known fact. So now it is continuing. So that is the only reason behind for the Bill 104 and genocide campaign. So it is a completely mythical approach to fool Canadians.
Thank you. Next question. Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam, or LTTE, which is also banned into about 27 countries, including Canada, as of today, carried out 26 years of terror in Sri Lanka. Genocide campaigns do not talk anything about those LTT atrocities. They are even in the bill 104. There is no mention about the atrocities committed by the Tamil Tigers, or no mention about other ethnicities that was affected by this bill. Are there any reasons to make this distinction where LTT atrocities are not recognized? What are your insights, Mr. Janati?
Let's have a look. I mean, recap on what kind of atrocities that Tamil Tigers have committed. You know, people are forgetting these things, and sometimes the Western politicians they get some money and from votes from these LTT diaspora people, so they forget. So let me just share you some pictures which I have prepared for some other presentation. Now you see here Dr. Neelan Tirushelvam. Now Dr. Neelan Tirushelvam is a Tamil. He was educated at Harvard, a constitution lawyer. This was his fate when he met the suicide bomber in Colombo. And then in the picture below, you see Dr. Rajini Tiraragama. Dr. Rajini Tiraragama was the head of anatomy of the Faculty of Medicine in the University of Jaffna. She was a critic of Tamil Tigers, and she was shot dead. And people have forgotten all this. Now, and then we see Sri Lanka's former foreign minister. This is Mr. Lakshman Kajiragama. He was a Tamil too, and he was shot dead. And then you see the havoc that they did. They targetedly killed Sri Lankan or the Sinhalese leadership. You see President Premadasa, who was killed on the street. And in the middle, you see Mr. Gaman Dissanayake, who was bombed on a street. He was probably going to become the next president. He was a presidential candidate. He was bombed. And then President Chandrika Bandaranaike. And then, as Chandre mentioned earlier, LTT held Jaffna for a long time. And then they evicted ethnically cleansed Muslims overnight, 75,000 Muslims. Now, it seems that these Canadian provincial politicians who now have supported this bill, are they not, they do not know all this? Or have they deliberately forgotten all this? So this is the question. And why they don't look at this is a question to me. Thank you very much.
Dr. Hevage, what's your thoughts on this?
Most of the area Ranil covered, but one of the most concern for me is the child soldier, because the LTTE recruited over 6,000 child soldiers. And finally, so we have found only, end of the day, only 594 child soldiers. So this is the situation. And this LTTE by forcefully and grab this child and children from their parents and put them into the battlefield. This child soldiers is an extremely crime, and it's a it's a war crime, and it is a crime against humanity. And there is no any addresser, there is no any acknowledge. So what happened to this child soldiers? What is the purpose of this? So who are the perpetrators? And the Vijay Thanagalasingham went there and put the Facebook post and commemorate their leader who recruited 6,000 child soldiers and put them into the battlefield. And the same individual go to the school and teach the children and Tamil genocide. So what is this? A double standard policy. And he can, other side of the story, and he can recruit 6,000 child soldiers and supporting for their leader. And by the same time, they want to go to the Canadian school and try to teach the alleged and bogus and mythical genocide. So they are trying to fool who? Eventually, if this commemoration week will last, Canadian will learn what is the real truth, and they will start to learn the real truth. Actually, we started the campaign against this, LTT to expose the LTT activities during the 26-year period. So this is the one of the biggest problem I have it. And they want to go to the school and to teach the Tamil genocide. And by the same time, they are the people who recruited and the child soldiers and put them into the battlefield, 6,000 of them.
And Dr. Chandra, your thoughts? Got 2 minutes.
Yes, indeed. I think this is much more deep than what most people think of. I mean, it is not that the Western governments do not know about the atrocities committed by the Tigers. In fact, they have much better knowledge than most of us. If you take the British government, the UK government, which led the genocide, which led the Geneva indictment against Sri Lanka, which did not include genocide, but which wanted Sri Lanka to carry out various prosecutions of its army for military atrocities and all that. But these governments know very well who did what, because there was, for instance, the British government. They had their own military observers, Colonel Gash, who used to send regular reports, who had contacts in the Wani through the International Red Cross, through the World Food Federation, and through various NGOs. So there are all these diplomatic cables. Similarly, the American government had a very well-organized system of information, and Robert Blake was the ambassador. And some of these dispatches came out in the WikiLeaks. And in these dispatches, we see these diplomats themselves saying that the army is acting in a very compassionate way and making remarks like that, which is completely contrary to what is being said by the militants of the Tamil LTTE who are left over. So all the Western governments have all the information if they want. And when Lord Nesaby, using the Freedom of Information Act, he actually managed to get some of that information out, but not all. So what is happening is a hypocritical game by the four governments which sponsored this action against Sri Lanka, refusing to release the information that they have, but using unverified information to drive this movement. And it is this movement that is also being used by people like Tanika Asalam to say that there were 40,000 deaths involved. And so this is a deliberate Western movement which is being applied whenever the government in Sri Lanka is not towing the Western line. And indeed, during the previous 2 or 3 years, during the previous 4 years, when the Sirisena government, which was in power with the blessings of the Western governments, they themselves, there was very little action against Sri Lanka. But the moment the new government came into power, a very different picture comes into being. And of course, if the Sri Lankan government were to join the Western Quad, which is directed against the in the Pacific Ocean against China, and if the Sri Lankan government had signed the MCC Pact and the so-called SOFA agreement, which are agreements which allowed the American government to land American troops in Sri Lanka without any visas or anything, if all these military pacts had been signed, there would be no action in this manner. And there would have been probably even action against the LTT in those countries. So this is all a question of global politics. And it is not that all, and the newspapers are driven, of course, by the politicians, and the politicians are driven by the votes in swing electorates. So that is what is driving all this. But the facts of the case are well known to the Western governments because they have had their information sources. So it's pure hypocrisy and pure political expediency and nothing else. Thank you.
Thank you. Now,
Anurag, can I add something to that?
sure, go ahead.
I think it would be important for these Canadian provincial politicians to, now if they support this bill, which is a bogus genocide bill, that they also let people commemorate the victims of the LTTE. I'm not talking about the victims of the LTTE on the Sinhalese side or the Sri Lankan government side, but the Tamils themselves, just to remind how brutal their actions was. Because those people who are behind this genocide claim, they belong to the same ideology group that follows the LTTE line. Now, in 1986, the LTTE completely massacred the Tamil Elam Liberation Organization group. Now, this is how the Indian writer Narayan Swami, he wrote a book called The Tigers of Lanka. Now, in this book, he quoted a member of Telo. So this is how this member describing the situation. I saw 12 of our people shot. They were killing even those who gave us water. I was put in a van and driven to Achadu village. That was the LTT torture camp. Niti, my friend, began crying, saying he wants to see his mother. I pleaded we were all Tamils. One LTT boy then shot Niti with a 9mm pistol. Parts of Niti's brains shattered on my shoulder. To terrorize me, they fired near my ears. They put Niti's body on tires and burned right there. This is just to remind those Canadian politicians who are towing the lines of the fascist LTT a bit of history. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question. Pro-LTT diaspora wants to build monuments in Western countries and wants to do publicity. In the past, we have seen this occurrence in the way of proclamations through City of Toronto, City of Brampton. Now, the newest trend is coming to presenting themselves into city council meetings and requesting for monuments to be built. This happened in the city of Brampton and the city of Markham. I'm going to put this out to the panel and the reason behind this. I'd like to invite Dr. Neville.
Thank you, Anurag. But actually, we need to go a little bit further back. 2009, and LTT was military defeated, and senior card is eliminated, and supreme leader also eliminated. So then after that, 2009-20, and they were celebrated this May 18 day as a Mulivaikal Memorial Day and Tamil Memorial Day, something like this. Then after, they changed the name in 2018 as a Tamil Memorial Day. It became a Tamil Genocide Memorial. So this is the evolution of the Tamil Genocide Day, or May 18. So then after that, the proclamation will happen, especially from the Toronto and the Brampton. And the purpose of this proclamation are clearly political, because we have obtained the Freedom of Information request through the City of Toronto city of mayor has admitted, I am proclaiming not because of I have a sympathy or I don't know about the real truth. I am acknowledging it because of the only political reason. So that was there. So then it's a similar situation in the Brampton, and Brampton also released the proclamation. And this proclamation business, it's not enough. And then after that, they try to other cities, Ajax and other city, and the other cities, they realize that this is the really the bogus claim and mythical genocide, and so therefore they didn't proclaim. So that program is collapsed. Now they had to find out another program. So what is the next program? And to get the Bill 104, and 2019 April, and bought the Bill 104. Then after that, it started campaign about the genocide campaign, but it didn't go anywhere up to 2021. Now, so they have some issue. So because they knew that the LTT pro LTT propaganda campaign propagandists, they knew that eventually people will ignore this educating this bogus Tamil genocide, because people will start to learn real conflict, and so what is the real conflict and all other details, and then all that information will come into the surface and public, and eventually it will die down. Then now they need to have another strategy. Only thing is strategy. They can have a monument erected in some area, and then people cannot question about that monument, that it is some sort of reflection about what happened about the Tamil genocide. So this is the money-making machine, and it's a well cooperated and well planned. That's how they manipulate in the Canadian system, and they have a larger agenda. The agenda is the mainly to make the money, and but I know many operatives in the pro LTT operative. We have identified 22 of them. None of them are not working, but they are living in a very luxurious house and luxurious car, and so this is the situation. So they want to maintain and continuing to that the money making machine. Now they have focused to the monument, because they knew that Bill 104 is not going to last forever. And then, so even though it was proclaimed for every year, it is not going to last, because the people start to learn and understand what is the real genocide. And so they will, people start resisting to learn. So this kind of bogus and mythical genocide, rather than studying in Rwanda and the Holocaust and everything. So that is the reason they want to put the monument wherever they can, and so that is the plan.
Thank you. Dr. Dharmavardhana, your thoughts?
Yeah, I believe that I mean, the LTT has always liked to have things like these monuments, then cemeteries with their dead. Very often these cemeteries, underneath the cemetery stone, there was really no body, no person or no corpse. But these are all symbols that they want to establish. And if you take a group in Brampton or a group in some other city, Markham, and if they say, look, we have built this monument, and so they can even go back to Bureau. At the moment, the diaspora has no footholds in Sri Lanka. It wants to make a connection with the Sri Lankan north of Sri Lanka, because that is where their final objective is. Now, the people who are somewhat militant in Sri Lanka are, of course, some extreme university students. And this monument, these university students had built a monument inside the campus without permission of the university, and in such a way that in fact, it even contravened all the safety regulations of the university. So the university pulled it down and rebuilt another according to the instructions according to the safety regulations that are current in the country, so that they in fact allowed people to commemorate their dead in a safe and acceptable manner. But on the other hand, the LTT diaspora, pro-LTT groups, who of course don't call themselves LTT anymore, they call themselves Islamists or what, separatist groups, of course, but they are saying, well, now this is an example of discrimination. This is an example of harassment. Our rights to commemorate the dead have been infringed by the government pulling down these monuments. We are therefore building a monument here. And that was the battle cry. And of course, the ordinary person doesn't know all this. They don't know that the monument was pulled down because it contravened safety regulations. And they don't know that the university itself built a replacement. Those things are conveniently forgotten. And in fact, a lie has therefore been perpetrated, saying that that the government and the university authorities have pulled down this monument and it is another example of harassment of the rights of the minorities. And here we in Brampton and in Markham, where we want to at least correct this error. This is the kind of propaganda that is being used. And of course, this kind of propaganda is inflammatory. It raises the people's emotions. It is a good way of collecting money. It's a good way of saying, look, we built this. This is our achievement. So these are the objectives. This is merely means of continuing their political program on the basis of unsubstantiated stories. Thank you very much.
Can I add something, Andrew?
Go ahead, please.
Yeah. So actually, so what happened here, there are pro-LTE activities happening here. There are front organizations, but there are many front organizations, and what they are doing, and they release the media releases, and they speak to media and Canadian mainstream media, and try to portray the picture against the Sri Lanka, and they try to portray the picture so completely mythical and false information as a truth. So that is what has happened. Then all other researchers who went behind to find out that real information, so they have found the real truth. But even though Canadian politician knows everything, yeah, because I know that definitely, and but still they are about to support for this pro-LTT manipulation. So because of getting elected, or maybe getting funding for their campaign, that kind of short term. Because at the end of the day, and everything is depending on how I will win my next election. So that's what they are going to do. So that is what is happening. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, when you look at the Bill 104, it's only for Ontario. What are the chances it can hit other provinces? What are the chances it could hit another geographic areas? Passing a political genocide through political means, and attempting, or they have actually succeeded because they have made this a law now. A lie, a law. Could you explain your thoughts about making a lie a law and the repercussions for the future moving forward? Dr. Hevagib?
Thank you, Andrew. But actually, so this is the legal question, but I don't want to elaborate much because of this one. This is a matter of rule of law, truth. Rule of law is a truth, and it is not their truth. So therefore, that matter has to be contested before the court. So this proceeding is going on. So therefore, I am not elaborate that part of the matter. However, if that bill pass in here, but I have seen Australia, so one of the supporter, pro-LTT supporter NPP, so he was talking about this bogus genocide and mythical genocide in New South Wales Parliament. Similar situation can be happen anywhere. But anyhow, there are researchers, so there are scientists, and there are policymakers. They might have a liberal view. Yeah, because I know that they went to the pro-LTT diaspora, they went to the Switzerland. No, actually, New Zealand. New Zealand Prime Minister say it is not my jurisdiction to declare any issue, statement, or genocide. So there are some liberal politicians have a understanding and a clear ethics, and they are driven by. So therefore, they will not do it. But still, pro-LTT diaspora, they want to expand the criminal empire. And so they will go to another province and establish the monument, establish the act, and collect the money, and do the commemoration seminar or webinar or maybe event, and there's some money. And so this money enough for them to live for the whole year. So that's what they do. Then after that, they put the innocent Tamil refugee person from Sri Lanka into the board and try to come over here, collect another 65,000. So this is what is going on. But those things will not last forever. So we know that. So that the mythical separate state idea is completely lost, and the same thing, and the truth will come out. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jainati, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think I have to completely agree with what Neville, Dr. Hevige said. The Tamil or the LTT diaspora will try through with the resources available to them and with their votes available to them, as we saw in Australia in the case of the provincial MP Craig McDermott coming out and claiming or proposing such an act to be enacted in New South Wales. So this will happen in different parts of the world, but this will happen perhaps in as Neville said, in the political sphere, where people could be bought over for money and for many other reasons. But there are academics and researchers who will not just buy such lies. You know, the lies have a certain lifetime. There have been very successful liars in the world. For example, Goebbels of Germany, and his lies were very successful for a certain period of time, but not a lifetime. So this will be in the end, this will be a lost exercise. But having said that, I think when such acts are enacted in different parts of the world, it is not good for Sri Lanka. It is not good for the Sinhalese as a majority. Because today, if you talk to a German about what happened in 1933 to the end of the World War, he starts being nervous all of a sudden. So that is in their subconsciousness. This will not happen in Sri Lanka because the Sinhalese and the Sinhalese majority know that they never committed genocide on Tamils, but the people abroad, they do not know the truth. So this can have a bad image on the profile of Sri Lanka when Sri Lanka looks into the future. So therefore, I believe that it is the duty of the Sri Lankan people living, especially in countries like Australia, to come together and get the experience of you people in Canada and try to inform these potential provincial politicians in those countries and inform them the truth so that they are informed before they take decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dharmardana. Your thoughts, please?
Well, in my opinion, I think, once this kind of thing starts, it never ends. There will always be people who will believe that there was a genocide, and there will be others who will believe that there was no genocide. Even when you take something extremely well documented, like the Nazi Holocaust of Jews, I mean, there are people who still insist that it did not happen. So this is the whole point. I mean, it is very convenient for the Tamil diaspora to believe it, because they collected money and they had to explain to their communities, after having collected so much money, what happened to all that money? Nothing. I mean, the movement was crushed. It finished after 30 years of fighting. It came to naught. So the answer is now, oh, I mean, we fought a liberation war. And in the end, it was a genocide that stopped us. So that is a good, excellent way of, clearing their conscience of having collected so much money and sent money to buy weapons. So there will be this narrative. And at the moment, you must understand that the Tamil organizations, especially under so-called transnational government, is a very powerful, well-organized, wealthy organization. I mean, so they will carry on this narrative and they will carry it on in all other countries. And of course, the opposite narrative that will be known, of course, within the academic community, but it will have very little, for a while, it will have very little power because it is not funded. There is no, and the Sri Lankan government is too engrossed with its own internal problems, and it does not understand the strength or the need for the international action. So at the moment, I think this story of a genocide will carry on for some time, for the next maybe decade or two. And what is true will never, it's just like the Holocaust, but in the other way around. The two myths will carry, there will be various types of myths that will be propagated. And there will be internet stories and people will believe what they wish to believe and what is politically convenient for them to believe and not what happened. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, the bill was presented, third reading, it received the royal assent. It is now law in Ontario, not in Canada, but in Ontario. What are the next steps? What can we do? How can we make, how can this lie be exposed? And what kind of challenges can we as a community bring? Dr. Neville?
So once the bill passed, whether it is a false information or whatever information you need, so it is the law. So then it will be carried out. So then we have a challenge, and for the legal challenge, and so we have presented the challenge, but I'm not going to talk about those things because it is before the court. And so that is the one option. Then if the court decide, so this is not a proper way to follow it, and it can be repealed, and if not, it will continue. So then other information, the public and should educate, and so they had to start learn what is the narrative behind this, the pro-LTT diaspora, and they will start reading and they will start doing some researches and everything. They will identify this information, and this information is freely available everywhere. And so if you do the scientific analysis, it will be concluded that end of the day there is no genocide. So this is what happening. But anyhow, but I agree with Dr. Chandra, and there is a political convenience, and somebody because of the political convenience, they accept some of the narrative for the personal benefit, maybe some other benefit. So that kind of thing. I mean that false information is everywhere. So we cannot stop social media and everywhere. So you will find out those informations are everywhere. But we need to, but all other students and other activists and everything, they have to put the real facts to the stage and to expose the bogus and mythical genocide. So that's what we should do, and we should educate, and we should have a different approach about this issue and explain. So what is the real thing and what is the background information was happening in Sri Lanka.
Thank you. For those of you listening in, tuning in, a constitutional question that has been filed by Dr. Neville Havegay with the Attorney General in Ontario on the validity of the law that was passed. More details of that can be found at policy-research.ca under publications. Now, going to Dr. Dharmawardana, what's your thoughts about that? Next steps.
Well, I think this is one of the most difficult questions that will be in front of us, because we have three things. First, we have to get the facts out to the public. Facts we have to get to our legislators, and we also need funds to do these things. And we also need to organize nationally and internationally. So this is the thing that is political, basically, essentially in parallel with the activities done by the Islamist groups. There has to be activities that can cope with their propaganda. And I don't think at the moment we have that capacity. And also the demographics in Canada's electorate is such that many of the Tamil diaspora people live and chosen to live in what you might call swing electorates. And this is partly a planned move, because many of the refugees are brought in by Islamist groups in their ships. They were given jobs, they were built up, and so they control a number of key electorates, and they control parties, and they have the capacity to raise money and influence political parties. So at the moment, that is how the coin has dropped. And what you might call, what we believe to be the correct political position is at the moment, I must say, in my comment with what you might call a pessimistic note, to say that our traction with the political movements and with the media is rather small. Thank you very much.
Mr. Janeti, your thoughts?
Yes, I think I agree to what Dr. Chandra has said, but it is important, I think, as for the Sri Lankan expatriates living in Canada, as now this has happened in Canada. As far as I know, the most of the Sri Lankans living in Canada are quite an educated group. They have not just come there as refugees, especially the Sinhalese diaspora living in Canada. Now, what can this act cause to them, or to their children, to their pride? Now, I know, living in Europe, Germany committed, the German government of 1930 committed genocide on Jews. So people, now even a young child, if he is told of, just reminded of what happened during that period, he starts to get nervous. So what can happen in Canada is that the young Sinhalese kids could be, they could be just scolded, or they could be accused of having belonging to a ethnic group that has committed genocide at what particular point of time, and this will not be good for their self-consciousness. So the Sri Lankans in Canada must be very conscious about this, and I appeal to the Sri Lankans in Canada at large to join with those activists who act on this, to join together and support in their campaign. To campaign to the politicians, you can decide on whom you will vote, and then talk with those politicians of what is wrong, what is correct, and how you will then behave. Every action has a reaction. So this is my plea to the Sri Lankan not LTT diaspora expatriates in Canada. Thank you.
And can I have the 1 minute before
go
we
ahead.
leave? And but actually there are, but because we have to divide the Tamil diaspora, and there are pro LTT group and moderate Tamils, and they want to live peacefully, and they don't want to involve with any politics. And if this group are silence majority, and so they have a massive power, and I hope, and very soon, and this silent majority will decide within their own community. So that's what happened. Sociologists and any researchers, they have found that kind of trend, and they cannot suppress their idea and other information, and so what they think, and eventually that silent majority will come, and so we will see the changes.
Thank you. We've had many questions. Unfortunately, we cannot present all the questions. Those will be addressed by email by the Center for Policy Research in Ontario. In conclusion, I'd like to thank the panelists, Dr. Hevage, Dr. Damardana, Ms. Jainati, for sharing your ideas on these pressing questions. Bill 104, Tamil Genocide Week Act, is now a law in Ontario. And the steps that's taken to raise funds by, I think, from Sri Action in the website ontariobill104.ca is critical to fighting this bill in the court. The panelists shared critical analysis on the background and on the concerns of many, as well as the future ramifications of this act. Ontario Policy Research have done many webinars starting from 2019 November from Toronto. Starting from Toronto, if I recall, it was at the Hilton in Markham. Many webinars to raise awareness of the many aspects of the draft bill when it was first published or presented. However, more actions need to be taken in court, as well as raising awareness among our community on the misinformation and the disinformation. We hope to join with you once again on another day with a topic that is of interest to our community. If you have any questions, please email info@policy-research.ca. My name is Anur Ferdinand, and it was a pleasure speaking to all of you. We'll meet again through Zoom on another day. Thank you, and have a great evening, great afternoon. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you.